Good morning and welcome to the Small Business Cheerleader podcast. I'm Nicola from NW Marketing and I'm joined today by Erin Madeley from Perth Makers Market and Erin Madeley Consulting. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me.
No problems. We're here today to talk about how to take a hobby and know whether it's ready to go into a full-time small business. So let everyone know, how did you get to this point and what is Erin Madeley all about?
Well, so I started getting into the creative sphere when I was pregnant with my kids. I was actually really, really sick and I couldn't be upright for more than about 5 minutes at a time because I was so unwell I would faint. And so I turned to crafting, and then that slowly grew into a business where I was making and selling products at markets. And I found a lot of the way that the markets in Perth will run very, very frustrating. You know, you'd have events that would say that they're for handmade products only, and then you would turn up and you would find that there were a lot of imported items or items that had been, designed here and manufactured overseas. And as someone hand making a product, you just couldn't compete on that playing field. You also had a lot of markets that you could never get in touch with the organizer. The information wasn't really clear. A lot of people that you could only get in if it was first come first serve, or they would have the same people all the time. And so I found that there was a real gap there for a very strictly locally handmade market where you could get in touch with the organisers and ask any questions or get clear information. So from there, I decided to start running my own market. I was really not really unhappy, but I was bored in my day job at the time. I was looking for something different to do. And so, Perth Makers Market was born, and we had our first event in February 2016. We started with just over 70 stallholders, and we had about 1,500 visitors to that very first event. And I was just, over the moon. I was blown away by the response that we had, especially because it was, our very first event and a 40-degree day. So it was not a pleasant day, but we still had people coming, which was great. And then by the time that we got to the end of that first year, we'd grown to between 150 and 180 stallholders, and we were averaging, 4,000 people per event. And we've now grown to become the biggest handmade artisan market in Perth. We have over 180 stallholders at every event and between 4,500 to 5,000 visitors at each event, which has just been really, really exciting. And then through all of that, Erin Madeley Consulting was born because I would get asked a lot of the time by other organisations or venues if I could come and run a market for them or help them with their event. But it didn't really fit the Perth Makers Market brand, being that we're so very strictly focused on local handmade only. So now I do consulting for other organisations like the local Applecross Rotary. I help them run their Jacaranda Festival every year. I work with Propel Youth Arts to help them. And this year I'm working with the town of East Fremantle on George Street Festival. But then I also am very passionate about helping our stallholder community to know more about business and how to get themselves out there and make sure that they're not just, financing their hobby, but if they want to run a genuine business and replace their income, that we can share skills. So we now do workshops where I work with other businesses to do education. I do one-to-one consults where I sit down with people and help them devise strategies for their business. And that's what I'm really passionate about as well.
Oh, it's amazing because I just know personally how much goes into organising and running a market. I've done them in the past for shopping centres that I've worked for, doing the marketing, and we've run markets, twilight markets, things like that.
Yeah.
And exactly how hard it is, and also that balance between what is a maker's market and what is a market in regards to just stalls for things that are actually products purchased in or products that are made overseas. I understand that that is a really hard line to go, and it's great.
Yeah.
You've been able to make that easier for those that do make their own products, know that when they come to your markets, they know exactly what they're getting and they know that you've been there and done that. And I think that that's what makes it so important when you find somebody that understands what it is you're doing as a hobby, but also can understand where it can go from there. and how to grow it. And the first thing we were going to talk about is, how do you know when it's time, or when you're ready to take your hobby to move it and scale it up into a small business? What would be your recommendations based on your experience?
Well, I think there's a couple of different ways that people go about it. So we see, a lot of people who kind of start their business when they're kind of going through a life change. We get a lot of people who, when they take that step into parenthood, they decide that, they don't necessarily want to go back to what they were doing before, or they discover a passion that they didn't know that they had. And a lot of people we see, they start selling because somebody in their life says, you make a great thing, you should sell this. And that's can be a really great stepping stone into testing the market and seeing if your product is viable and if it is something that will sell. But what we see a lot of people making the mistake of is not looking at it as a business. So when I suggest people decide, I'm not going to just treat this as a hobby anymore, I want this to be a business, is when you're ready to take that step away from whatever your paid employment is, or if you are ready for this to become your form of paid employment. And that point in time is different for everybody. And there's no hard and fast rule saying that you have to have that thought in mind when you start selling, but at some point in time, you have to decide, is the time and effort you're putting into what you're doing worth what you're getting out of it? And if all you're looking to get out of it is, getting out there and connecting with community and having people enjoy what you do, then that's great. Treat it as a hobby, keep it that way. But if what you're wanting to get out of it is, some income to support yourself and your family, even, and it doesn't matter how much that income is, you're the one who has to decide that. But if you're ready for it to be a job, that's when you need to start looking at it as a business rather than a hobby.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Because people forget that just because somebody says to you what you're doing is awesome, which it 100% would be, doesn't mean you know how to run a business. And
Exactly.
This is where, from my experience working with small businesses on their marketing in particular, a lot of them have done exactly that. They've gone into business because either they've become very busy and they've thought, well, I better make something out of this, or somebody has told them that they should do it. And having those foundations in place is the first step that people need to do when looking to scale into a hobby to a business. And having those from the beginning, and having somebody like you that has been there and done that, and going through your consulting side of the business will allow them to know that they're in good stead for scaling it, that they're doing all the right steps. Because people that just, I haven't got time, I haven't got money, I've got to do it all myself, I can do it, which is great. But then if you miss some of those steps, I mean, you're really, really shooting yourself in the foot, aren't you, for later on? It will come back.
Absolutely. And you find out that, somewhere down the line, you end up behind the 8 ball, or there's things that you haven't considered or thought of. And I can say that I've done it both ways. So like when I was making and selling things, that's how I got into doing it. Is I was crafting to occupy myself because, I had to adopt a sedentary lifestyle when I was pregnant. I had to hire a cleaner. My mum had to come over and help me with cooking. I literally couldn't do anything besides sit down. And there's only so much TV you can watch and book reading you can do before you're just like going insane. And so I was making things and taking photos, and people were like, oh, do you sell them? Can I buy one from you? And that's how my very, very first business started. So I started making and selling and going through that process of, I'm just going to go and sell on markets, and I'm going to set up a shop on Etsy, and I'll decide maybe I'll write a blog. That one for me, I only ever really treated it as a hobby, and just seeing all that experience that I got there versus when I started the market and the process that I went through when I went, no, I want this to be a business. I want this to be my form of employment. I want this, to generate enough income to replace my, at the time, 3-day-a-week government job. And so, the mentality there, the difference between the two, it's massive. And so I think that's the biggest thing that people need to look at is, okay, what do you want to get out of this? What is it that you're trying to achieve? If it is just getting out there and connecting with community, great. Just keep it as a hobby. Only look to cover your costs of whatever it is that you're making. Don't worry about necessarily, covering an income for your time. But if it is something that you're wanting it to be a source of employment, you want it to be that it generates a certain amount of income for you to free you up to do, you know, what you're passionate about, then you definitely need to go and shift that mindset from hobby to business.
Yeah, 100%. And what would you recommend from your experience working with hobbyists that have transferred over? What is the best thing and the systems or processes that they need to have in place when they're making the transition? What would you recommend people look at when they're starting to think about going into this as replacing employment?
The first thing that I think that a lot of people forget or don't consider is actually sitting down and writing a business plan. So there are a lot of really great free resources around in terms of finding templates. Small Business Development Corporation have one that's online, including a guide on how to use it. But the best thing that I can recommend people do is actually think about, as a business, writing a business plan. So you want to look at, you know, what are your goals and achievements that you're hoping to hit? Is it that you have a certain amount of income that you're wanting to earn? Is it that you're wanting to have a certain kind of lifestyle? And how are you going to go about achieving those things? And part of that also needs to factor in things like your marketing plan. How are you going to get your name out there? Yes, social media is a great resource, but it is not the only thing that you need to be looking at. And also branding. So a lot of people, when they're thinking about a brand, they think of, oh, I'm going to have a pretty logo and some colors, but that's not all a brand is. And so I hugely recommend people take the time to look at branding as a whole. What is your brand? And the one thing that a lot of people that I work with don't realize is a brand is really about how your business makes someone else feel. And so trying to get that into your head is, okay, so yeah, maybe you just make pretty earrings, but it's not just that you make pretty earrings. You're you know, bringing someone this experience of your product, and it's not just the fact that they get to wear these beautiful accessories. It's also that warm fuzzy feeling that they get inside when they interact with your business. It's also about those interactions that they have with other people when they're wearing your product. It's about what's your customer service like, what's your tone of voice like. All of those sorts of things tie into your brand, and then that informs things like how you get yourself out there with your marketing strategy, which as a marketing specialist, that's something that you would be so familiar with, and a lot of people just, they don't even think about.
No, they don't. And I mean, I know that when we do our sessions, our startup sessions are more about our brain dump sessions in getting, you know, your vision, mission, core values, making sure you understand why you're doing what you do. And then we talk about getting it out there in relation to talking to emotions, because people buy on emotions and they back it up with logic later. I can't tell people that enough. So you're exactly right. You're talking to the emotion. It's the feeling that what you do or what you sell is giving people. And when you're marketing that, you're talking to that emotion. So your copy, your content, your brand needs to talk to that emotion. And you need to also find yourself aligned customers, people that are on that journey with you. They align with where you see and what impact your product or service has. And the more you find aligned clients, the more you're going to find top clients, and top clients refer you. They become raving fans, and they're your best asset. So you're so right in regards to social media not being the only way. If you can get your brand aligned with the right clients, you can get raving fans, and they don't cost you money to actually get to. Remember, the more you build up those raving fans that refer you, the more it's going to save you in those marketing dollars, because you're going to be already talking to people that are converted. And that's what it's all about, building up that brand and bringing in those aligned people, and then having them be your voice.
Yeah, exactly. And it's one of those things where a lot of the time when I'm giving a workshop and we're talking about this branding and putting yourself out there, and we talk about who is your target market, and inevitably the answer we get is, oh, I want to sell to everyone. And I'm like, yes, you want to sell to everyone. That's a lovely idea. You're not going to be for everyone, and that's okay. And I think getting that into a lot of hobbyists' mindsets is something that, you know, definitely shifting from being a hobbyist to a business. It's definitely a big change in thinking for a lot of people, because you just think, oh, you know, a lot of the time when you're talking about your product or you're talking about what it is that you make, you're bouncing ideas off of people who already know you and already know what it is that you do, and they already love you and want to support you. But that doesn't mean that everybody you encounter is going to love what you do. And I know that, you know, especially with what I do, I'm not for everyone. You know, I'm this colorful individual who I'm generally a little bit in your face with my appearance, and that's fine, you know, and that's okay. I'm not going to be someone who is going to work with corporate entities, and that's okay as well. And so I think for a lot of people, when you're taking the time to go, okay, I'm going to shift into a business, I'm going to look at my business plan, make sure you're taking the time to go, okay, who is your target audience? Who is it that you're wanting to sell to? Who is it that you're wanting to work with? And then finding a way to get yourself in that direction. And that's where I say the biggest thing that anyone can do to shift from being a hobby to a business is sitting down and looking at a business plan. But also not just sitting down and writing it for the sake of writing it, genuinely taking the time to think about it. And then once you've got that template that you've filled in, taking it to other people who can read through it, and be a sounding board for you, you know, not just friends and family and people who already support you, but also other people in business. And they're going to help you with knowing if you've considered everything, have you thought about, you know, this, that, and the other that maybe you haven't considered, and then regularly checking in with your business plan. The number of times that I see people just kind of, it's a set and forget sort of a thing. You've written it, you go, okay, great, I have this idea, and then you put it aside. You know, filling it in and putting it aside, it becomes a waste of time. You need to have it there as a checkpoint for yourself, because a lot of the time you're going to find that you'll have opportunities that come up and you go, oh yeah, I'm gonna try this thing, I'm gonna try that thing. But if your goal is here and this opportunity that comes up is over here and it takes you in a different direction, you need to make sure that you're checking in with yourself and going, okay, is this goal that I initially had no longer relevant, and is this where I want to be, or should I not say yes to everything that comes up because this is where I want to go to?
Oh, you're preaching to the converted here. I love that. I love that, because we definitely are on the same page. I talk to a lot of my clients. I work with a lot of tradies, and trying to get them into that mindset of trying not to be everything to everyone, because you do end up being just having so little niche. And finding where it is and what your top clients are, and then really showing up where they are and really providing a solution to their services, to their problems, sorry, because the more you can provide a solution to a problem for a target market, the more you become an authority in that market, and the more people will come to you. And the more of those top clients you get, you know, you start to build up that authority. And that comes with any business type. You just need to find where it is that you sit in the market, where the gaps are, where you can really show and shine, and really start to own that. And we talk about a vision, and getting to that vision is where your mission comes in, setting those actionable goals and KPIs and looking at them every 90 days at least, and seeing, are you on track? Are you not on track? Where do you change? And making sure you're not getting distracted by what we call putting out fires or shiny new things. Wow, that looks exciting. I'll do that. Well, is it getting you closer to your vision that you set?
And with the creative community, that's such a common thing that we have happen, that, you know, you go, oh, I love this thing that I make, or, oh, I want to try working with this new medium. You know, and I'm definitely someone who does this. I have to catch myself all the time. And, you know, just because it's something that you love and something that you enjoy doing, or it's a new idea, doesn't mean that it's something that's necessarily going to fit in with your business. And it's not necessarily going to be aligned with that vision and mission that you have, and that point where you want to be. And so one of the things that is a really big learning curve for everybody in the creative industry, particularly when you're selling a product, and a lot of the people that I work with, it's, you know, getting that mentality around you're not selling something that necessarily immediately solves a problem. It's a lot of you know, you're selling beautiful things for people that solve something that's maybe not an intangible problem. It's a, you know, you're wanting to have a unique gift for someone, you're wanting to show someone how much you care about them and how much you're thinking about them. And it's those sorts of things. And just because you have a product that you make and love doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to sell well. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to suit your target demographic for your brand. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's something that you should invest your time and effort in. And I think that shift in mind, that mindset of it being just because it's something that you love, everyone's going to love it. That's where you have, that's the biggest difference, I think, between a hobbyist and a business, is that you need to think about, okay, yeah, I love this thing and I love creating this thing, but if it's going to be that I spend 3 hours making it and I can only sell it for $20, whereas I can spend 15 minutes making this other thing and sell it for 15, well then, okay, if you're going to be a business, that's where you invest your time.
Yeah, it's all about, in the end, I know we hate to say it as sometimes as creatives, it's about the profit. It's, are you creating a profitable business? Because ultimately we should be creating a business that in the end we can step away from. And to do that, it needs to be able to show profit. It needs to be able to show it's sustainable. So that's where all of this mindset shift comes in, 100%. And it doesn't have to be hard. It just has to be more setting goals and making sure you're on your way to where you want to be, and just not living in the now as much. More, planning, one year ahead to, up to 10 years as having a big, hairy, audacious goal, I like to call it.
Yeah.
Setting smaller ones to make sure you're on your way. I think that is 100%. Now, if we're talking about products, which we just were, I know we talked previously before we got in here about how you price products. Now, that's something that you get asked a lot. So what would you be talking to with people starting this out in the business sense on how they would start pricing their products?
So pricing products is something that, particularly in the field of handmade, is extraordinarily difficult, especially if you're wanting to be competitive in the market. So if you Google how to price my products, there's a lot of things that come up that are very formulaic and don't work for handmade products. So that kind of comes into things like, okay, so what's the cost of your materials? Figure out how much you want to pay yourself per hour. How long does it take you to make? And that's your cost price, not factoring in your overheads. So you do also have to take into account your overheads, which I think a lot of people, when they're in a handmade business or a hobbyist switching from being a hobby to a business, they don't consider, but it is something that you definitely need to factor in. So those sorts of things, that's your cost price for the product. And then this formula will say times it by 2. And that's your wholesale price. Times it by 2 again, and then that's your retail price. But the problem ends up being, if you go, okay, well, I'm going to charge my time out at $20 per hour. This product takes me 2 hours to make. It's $40 before I've even factored in cost of materials or overheads. Then you add that in and you times it by 2 to get your wholesale price. Your minimum is there for $80, and then, $160 just for your time. So one of the things that you have to look at when you're pricing your products as handmade is not just those sorts of things, but also what's already out there in the market. And then where does your product sit in terms of quality against the quality of others that are in the market? So I always say, do that formula as a base to give you a guide and at least let you know roughly where things might be. And then definitely you want to go and do your research. So resources that are really good for researching, what other people in your field are doing is definitely go and look at Etsy. So Etsy is a global platform. It used to be the be all and end all for handmade products and design products. It still is the biggest one out there, but there's a lot more on there now than just strictly handmade. There's a website in Australia called Made It. That one's worth looking at as well, but also find out who your competitors in your area are and take a look at their social media and their websites. And then what you can do is, if you're not sure if you're at the high end or the low end of that market, is find a happy medium price. But then you have to take that price against all of those other factors that we've talked about, cost of materials, your time and your overheads, and go, are you at least, covering your costs and some extra profit for you? Because that profit bit is all of a sudden what turns you from being in a job that just covers your time to a business. And so that's kind of the starting point. And a lot of the time you can spend hours and days and weeks researching this. And sometimes you just have to go, okay, what do I want to earn And then how do I earn that against the products that I'm selling? And so that's another way of looking at how to price your products as well, is, okay, well, if this is what I want to earn, what are my best sellers? What can I sell them for that people are willing to pay for? And then also do market research against people who already know your brand and your business, especially if you're already a hobbyist selling in the community. If you're already selling, what you can do is research with your audience, and you can talk to people who are past customers. You can talk to, fellow people in your community. Facebook groups is a really great place for the creative community. There are a lot of stallholder groups around for people who participate in markets. There are a lot of artist and maker groups around on Facebook, and they can be a really great place to do those sorts of research as well.
That's exactly right, because it is taking into account the business side, isn't it? Like you say, you've got to make sure that there is that profit in there to make sure that your business is viable, and finding those parts in your product suite that can allow you to do that, or whether you're looking at bundling various products up and selling them, different ways of marketing your products as well to enable you to have a greater profit margin in there, and looking at what other people are doing. And a lot of people are now going into that thing of like, well, this is exactly like you said, what I want to earn, so this is how I'm going to make that work. And we need to get out of that trading time for money thing that we get stuck into as employees. You're trading your time for your money, and look at, okay, what am I putting out there? What am I giving? And what do I want to price that at? But you still have to look at the market. I mean, that's where, when you're product based, it has to be more based on that, doesn't it? As opposed to services where you can be a little wider in your why. But you need to find out where you sit on that product scale. Like you said, are you going high quality? Are you going the mainstream, or are you going cheap and quick because that's what people want? Where do you sit? And that comes back to your branding, doesn't it? And your actual overall branding of your business. Are you high-end, high quality? People expect to pay more because that's how you are branded. And it doesn't mean that your product costs more. It can just mean that the way that you present yourself, and people want to be aligned with that. So again, it comes down to, who are you talking to, who's aligned with you, and what's your messaging in your branding. So that's why it's so important to get that set before you start launching and you start going out into the market, because you need to know where you sit. Where do you sit? Are you quality, mainstream, or are you cheap and cheerful? Where are you? And
yes, exactly. And some of the other things that I think don't get thought about when you're pricing your products as well is, are you eventually going to grow to the point where you need to start charging GST? And so, you have to be earning over $75,000 a year before you start charging GST. But if you haven't factored that into your pricing at the beginning, and all of a sudden you get to a point where you're having to pay GST, you either then need to look at repricing your products and adding it on, which can disrupt and disappoint an existing customer base, or you're eating into your profit margin. So one of the things that I hugely recommend people do is start higher with your pricing. It is so much easier to start higher and reduce your pricing than it is to go the other way. And I remember talking to a stallholder who I've known for a number of years now. She started out with us when we started the market back in 2016. She doesn't put prices on her products, and she will sell products at different prices depending on where she is, and even throughout the day. And she'll say some days she'll sell one product at $20 and it'll go gangbusters. Other days, she'll sell that same product at $20, nobody wants to buy it, put the price up to $40 and everyone's buying it. And it really can be a very variable thing. And so one of the things that we do get asked about some people attending markets is, should I put my price tags on things? I'm someone who personally likes to see a price tag on something. I automatically assume if there's no price tag on it, it is too expensive for me. And sometimes it can be hard to interrupt a conversation to ask how much something costs. But if you go the other way of not having a price tag on things, it does give you that opportunity to have that negotiation with the customers that are coming and talking to you about your product. And you have then the opportunity to do a little bit of research on the spot.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And that comes down to your personality too, doesn't it? If you
Very much
are
so.
confident enough to have that, and you can see that in markets I've been to and I've run myself, where you can see the stallholders that have that about their product and can do that, or the others that are just testing and just want to put prices out and see what sells and what doesn't. And it's the same with services and on the websites. You know, some have them, some thoroughly believe in having transparent pricing. I'm one of those, and others will not, because yes, it comes down to the negotiation at the end. And it
Absolutely.
allows you to show your value before you actually talk about a price. And that's where, if you're a stallholder that is able to do that, people will see the value in what it is you're selling and be willing to pay more than just grabbing something that has a price on it. So where you sit in there will be all dependent on how you actually are in that process of selling, and also what you believe in. If you're testing a new product, you might not have that as much. If it's something that you thoroughly have seen sell and you believe, you'll be more than willing to have that negotiation, wouldn't you, with people that might be new to you?
Yes, exactly. And one of the other things that we always talk about, particularly if you're going to be going out to markets and selling, is know ahead of time whether or not you're willing to provide a discount, or you're willing to package things up and bundle them together. And it's an unfortunate thing that makes me so angry, but you'll find that everyone at a market, they just are going to assume that they can negotiate down on price. I always kind of give an example of, if you walked into a bricks and mortar retail store and something is priced the way it is, do you negotiate on price, or do you just say, oh, well, that's the price of the product and I'm going to pay for that? Why all of a sudden, when you're at a market and you're buying from a business, do you think it's okay to ask, if I buy 2 of these, can I get this for free? Or are you willing to give me a discount? And a lot of the times, particularly when people are really just starting out, or they're in that process of they're just a hobbyist, or if they're in that, transition period of going from a hobbyist to a business, if you haven't thought about it ahead of time, you feel really put on the spot, like you have to provide a discount. And so I always say to everyone, make sure that you look at this ahead of time. Are you willing to provide a discount? And if the answer is no, but you're really confident about, oh, no, that's just the price. Yes, you may have people who decide it's too expensive and walk away, but more often than not, you'll find that the person who's asked goes, no worries, and then they pay the full price anyway. So definitely factor that into your decision-making process before you go and sell in person at events.
Yeah, that's it, because discounting is just a race to the bottom, isn't it? Ultimately, if you get from the beginning into the mindset that discounting is the only way to get a sale, you are really just racing to the bottom in the pricing, and you're never going to get that part of your business that's making profit. So if you start from the beginning with the mindset of, this is the pricing and I'm confident in that because I know what's gone into it, that will come across. People will see that. But the more fear you have in trying to sell, the more they see that fear, and they can think, well, obviously it's not worth that, and so it's about the confidence, I think, in trying to have that conversation with people that are coming to you wanting to buy stuff. They want to buy, so it's about how confident do they feel in you being able to provide what it is that they're after, and that will come across. So that'll come with time, I imagine, too. But
very much so.
To not get into that constant discounting, that's all, because that will always eat into your margin, and you'll never end up becoming profitable.
And that's not to say that you can't decide to do things like have a sale or a special, but if you are the one making that decision, it's very different than being put on the spot and feeling like you're pressured into essentially giving things away for free.
Yeah, or thinking that's the only way you can sell, because that would obviously hurt your mindset as well. Now, finally, we've talked about the best places to sell, Etsy, and we've talked about other angles for hobbyists to get onto, and also for small business when you transition. Is that the main ones that you think of when it comes to selling, or what else would you recommend for people looking to sell their products?
So I think Etsy is a really great one to get on board with. They have had increases in fees over the years. So you will find that you have a higher margin of your profit that you're giving away by being on a platform like Etsy versus having a standalone website. So, a lot of people go, oh, well, do I need a website? And my answer is no, you don't need one, but it is a handy thing to have, particularly if you're going to end up having repeat customers, because you might find that people initially find you on Etsy, but then when they come to purchase from you again in the future, they'll go to your standalone website and all of a sudden your profits are higher. So I definitely think having a website is great. And you can do that in a lot of different ways. You don't have to have one that you're spending oodles and scads of money. It's really easy to build one yourself using something like Shopify or Squarespace or Wix. And there are a lot of really great ways to then market yourself, directing people to your traffic to your website. I do kind of use the example of, having a shop like Etsy is like having a storefront in a big shopping center, whereas having a standalone website is like having a shop that's just on a street front. So it's more important that you direct the traffic to your own standalone website than it is that you direct traffic to Etsy, because your customers on Etsy are already there. But you still do have to spend a lot of time and effort on the SEO side of things on Etsy, which I think is something that a lot of people don't realize. Is it's not a set and forget thing. It's not just a thing where you list a product and people are automatically going to find you. You probably have to spend equal amounts of time working on your SEO on Etsy as you do on a standalone website. So I would always say, if you're going to choose one or the other, choose Etsy as your starting point. If you're growing and you're wanting to attract a lot of those repeat customers, definitely want to have a standalone website. And the way that I find a lot of people work the best and have the most success is actually by having both. But also having a standalone website, you can do things like have your products tagged and listed on social media. So if you're posting about a product on Instagram, you can tag it, someone can click on the photo and go immediately to that product and purchase it on your website. You can do that with Etsy too, don't get me wrong. But if you have an option of directing traffic to one place or another, you're definitely going to have increased profit margins on a standalone website. It also lends an air of more professionalism and credibility to your business by having a standalone website. It helps to establish you as someone who, it's maybe not just a hobbyist, but you are serious about your business. It gives people the opportunity to learn more about you. And you can also do things like have a blog that you can then put onto Pinterest and grab more traffic that way. So I say the other things to people that you really definitely want to be looking at in terms of selling is research into collective stores. There's a lot of them that are around now. They're structured in a couple of different ways. So some of them you pay for shelf space and then they don't take any commission. Some you pay for shelf space and commission, and some are commission only. Reach out to them, but don't just reach out once, reach out regularly, because they're often turning over products in those collectives. Some people, will leave the collective and then they need to fill those vacancies. So don't just ask once and then feel like that's the only time that you're going to have your opportunity. Check in with them regularly and find out if they're looking for new stockists.
Yeah.
Not only those collectives, but you can also find things like independent hairdressers now. They like to sell things like jewelry and scrunchies and soaps and things. My tattoo artist that I go to, she works with a local soap person for like aftercare, skincare products. Think of those small micro businesses or small businesses that are around in your local area, and they can be great opportunities for connection as well, because a lot of small business owners, like your hairdresser, your tattoo artist, your nail person, they're wanting to help support other small businesses as well. So that can be a really great connection point too. And then Facebook groups is a really great place to join, and networking groups. I don't think a lot of creative businesses think about joining a networking group, because you think networking group and you think accountants and lawyers. That's not all networking groups are about. Those accountants and lawyers like to buy products to give their clients. So being involved in those networking groups, I think, is a real missed opportunity for a lot of those creative product-based businesses, and it's well worth looking into joining them.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I find you're right. I mean, people say, like myself, within, say, a marketing agency with clients, we're always looking welcome gifts or gifts for certain milestones, etc. And to know that you have a go-to in the creative industry is just a no-brainer, because that's where you get the personalized service, and that's where we've always got our gifts for clients from that, whether it's a smash cake or whether it's a candle or cookies or all those sorts of things these days. as an agency, it's so easy to be able to find someone in your network, be it like, you know, Fusion Business Group or any of the other groups where there are more and more creatives coming in. So highly recommend that as well. And those networking events, you create those relationships. And that's what I'm talking about with raving fans. So if I'm happy, I'm telling everyone else I know where to go and get their stuff from. So there, you haven't spent any marketing dollars and I'm sending people your way because of the personalized service I've had. So people need to get aligned people because we're raving fans. And that is, if I could leave anyone with anything, it's definitely about trying to find the right people, because we do refer on. And I think that's where you can grow and grow and grow without having to spend the massive marketing dollars that you might think you do just by the time of investing in a relationship with a top client. I think that that's really important.
Yeah. One of my favorite sayings to tell people is people buy from people. You know, it's about that experience that you're able to give and that relationship that you can form with a business owner. And, you know, that customer service side of things is such a massive part of, you know, particularly, you know, product-based businesses. As, you know, you think, oh, okay, my earrings that I make are really unique. Yes, they might be unique, but they're not the only earrings that are out there. Anyone can go, you know, into half a dozen shops and find a pair of earrings. So part of what makes your business unique is that experience that you're providing to other people. I did also forget to mention about markets. So one of the things that we see a lot of when people are starting to sell is they feel the need to go to every single market that they can get into. And I want to just warn people against that. The number of times that you'll get to, you know, 6 months, 12 months after you've been doing that process and you're so burnt out and you're all of a sudden hating what it is that you do, that's just something that you don't want to do. So do your research before you look at booking into a market. Attend the market as a visitor. Look at the people that are around. Are they your client? If the answer is no, being a stallholder there is probably not worth your time. That being said, from one market to the next, you can find that there is a massive difference. And, you know, we'll have stallholders who, one market, they have their best sales day on record in 10 years. The next market, they might not sell very much. And so there can be quite a wide amount of variety. So I always say, give any market that you're trying a minimum of 3 tries before you decide whether or not it's for you as a stallholder. But just because you can get into a market doesn't mean that it's going to be a good fit for you. And just because a market is, you know, run by a big organization like mine versus a small volunteer group, that doesn't mean that the big organization is going to be the right fit for you. Maybe the small volunteer run one is. So definitely do your research. Yes, speak to other stallholders that are in the community. That's once again where those Facebook groups can be hugely invaluable. But you do want to make sure you're doing your research before you book into a market, because not all markets are created equal. And you're not going to find your customer at every market that you attend.
No, that's exactly right. And I know we ran our markets for 3 years, and the first intake was massive and we had lots of people. And then bit by bit, it slowly, people saw the same people, and it can work or it can't work. And it just, as you say, it depends on people's perceptions and listening to people that have done them before. And also from a shopping centre point of view, also, I know a lot of shopping centres are starting to provide little carts and little things for creatives to have a couple of hours or 3 or 4 hours at shopping centres now as well. So there's other ways to try and get, if you think a type of demographic is around where you are. But I think it's definitely great to get into your local market scene, scene, and just start to experience what it's like. From what I've spoken to in the market, stallholders I've had in mind, that's what I get the sense that they all tend to do.
Yes,
get into definitely the scene and learn, and that's the best thing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it's been awesome because I've learned heaps, because not being in a creative space, but having lots of networking friends that are, it's just great to hear more insight into how it all really can work from transitioning over, and from dealing with small businesses. I can really see the benefits of how dealing with you on a consulting basis can help them build and bridge that transition. So let people know, where can people find out more about you, the consulting or the markets? Where's the best place to find out more about you?
Well, social media and my website. So if you're interested in being a stallholder with Perth Makers Market, our website is perthmakersmarket.com, and you can find all the information you need there. We only run a select number of dates per year, so you do need to kind of be aware of that ahead of time. But we always have wait lists if you've missed a cutoff date to apply for anything. And then if you're interested in talking to me about consulting, product photography, any of the workshops that we have coming up, you can find all that on my social media, Erin Madeley Consulting, or on my website, which is erinmadeley.com.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure that most people will head there, because I think having that information readily available is just a lifesaver for creatives, whether they're new to it or, like you said, wanting to make that transition. To have someone in their corner and support them is just invaluable. Well, it's been awesome to have you. Thank you so much. And
thank you so much for having me. I've loved chatting and talking about this stuff.
Small business marketing, bridging gaps, anything. I could talk all day, and I know we probably would.
Yeah.
So we'll leave it there, and I'll send everyone over and put the links in the bio. This, of course, will be on YouTube and on Spotify. So if you're listening on Spotify, you can follow those links. If not in YouTube, you'll see them in the description below. So thank you again, Erin, and we'll be following you online.
Thanks so much.
See ya.
See ya.